Hey guys, it's Kolby. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to firstly say thank you to everybody who's been listening. It's been really cool to watch our analytics continue to improve over just the last couple of months as we get more content out to you in a more regular way. So thank you for that. The next thing I wanted to say is that I'm really happy with the direction in which the show is going. Dawson and I are not natural scientists, as we've said for the billionth time, but it's really important to us to share our commentary and share our opinions because we as lay people want to speak to you as lay people as well. And so that's really important for us to provide scientifically accurate information, but also provide our own commentary on it and our own ideas and our own takes. Any merit of a talk show or a podcast requires the hosts to have opinions. And Dawson and I have opinions, whether they're accurate or not. Sometimes they aren't, and that's okay. That's just kind of the nature of the way that this show goes, and we're glad that you're here experiencing it with us. Today's episode was all about Odysseus and the lunar landing that happened this last week, and then it tipped over. About 4 hours after we finished recording this particular episode, Dawson and I are going to be dropping on today, the day that this episode releases to you, which would be Monday, February 26th, we're going to be dropping a Patreon-specific react video to our own episode here today and the Odysseus lander tipping over on the moon, because so much of today's episode revolves around that and the hope for the future with the technology that we have. And then the technology fell over on the moon. And while I'm chuckling about it now because you have to find some levity in a really terrible situation, not the most ideal thing, gotta say. So with all that being said, if you want to check out that content, it'll be for our Patreon-specific subscribers. You can do that by going to www.spacebetweenpodcast.com/Patreon. Or if that's not something that you're interested in, which is totally okay, just keep on listening and enjoy today's episode. Hello and welcome back to The Space Between, one of the top astronomy podcasts in the world, and for that matter, the universe. Kolby Van Camp here with Dawson Wagner. Dawson, welcome back to the United States. How was your time in Mexico?
It was lovely. A nice detox just to get away from the chaos of the world and also to appreciate the United States once more for what it is.
Yeah.
Big things and lots of burgers and fries.
Lots of burgers and fries. When I was in Mexico just a little while ago, I had a burger there, and not gonna lie, it's like the fries are legit. The burger, you just can't beat like a burger from Manhattan.
Well, we don't have a Whataburger here in Manhattan, but a Whataburger was in the airport that I had a layover in, and it was just so wonderful to be able to have an American burger.
You and Patrick Mahomes and the Whataburger camp. You put a bunch of ketchup on there too.
The Mahomes patty. I gotta try that out once they bring the Whataburger to Kansas City.
There's already a Whataburger in Kansas City.
Oh, they already do? Okay,
yeah.
See, that goes to show how much I know about Whataburgers in Kansas City. But that's not what we're talking about today.
It's all good. Glad to have Dawson back in the United States. So we're just going to jump into today. But first, before we do that, I need to say that we're going to be going to the VLA, New Mexico. Very large array, thanks to the National Radio Astronomy Observatory and the fine people over there. They're allowing us to come over and participate in this really exciting project. And I'm really stoked to see how this plays out for us and the way that we're able to bring content to you. And we're really making a push to get some folks on our Patreon because we're going to be putting exclusive content from that trip on the Patreon. So if you don't want to miss any of the stuff that we're doing live while we're at the VLA, then go check out our Patreon. $2 a month gets you into our Discord server. $5 a month gets you into all of our exclusive content that we'll be putting on our Patreon page. You can access that at spacebetweenpodcast.com/Patreon. Patreon. That's going to be the fastest way for you to be able to get into our exclusive content, and then we'll put regularly scheduled content out there for you as well. A couple of different podcast episodes. It'll just be exciting. And then to kick off our pre-launch to the VLA tonight, on the night that we're recording this, it's a Friday. We'll release this on Monday, but Friday we're recording a Patreon exclusive episode with my brother-in-law, Ben, who's going to be going to the VLA with us. He's kind of nerdy about this. He listens to the show. When we told him we're going to the VLA, he said, "Oh my God, can I come too?" And we said, "Of course, that's going to be fun." A little bit of a bro trip going on. And then one of the fans from the show, she is a friend of mine, but still a major fan, listens to all the episodes, texts me about it, engages with us on social media. We're going to sit down, record with Ben and Aaron tonight and talk about aliens. So that's going to be exciting, and it's going to be exclusive to Patreon. So if you want to get that episode, go check it out there and subscribe to our Patreon. So that's really all I can say at the moment. But let's get into the huge news that we've got, because the United States is back on the moon for the first time in 50 years. That's really cool. Very cool. You want to break that down for us?
It's just amazing. It's crazy to think, the last time the United States had something on the moon that we had sent there was the year that The Godfather came out. Think about that. When I think of that movie, it was ages and ages ago.
Look how they massacred my boy.
My boy. It's so crazy. So the intuitive machine landing basically is what this group is. It's called Intuitive Machines. It's a private company that designs aircraft, and it uses artificial intelligence and all sorts of different technology that allows us to be able to send things like Odysseus back to the moon. So Odysseus was one of the first lunar modules since Apollo 17 lander landed on December 1972 on the moon, which is just incredible to think. I mean, it wasn't crewed. We didn't have a human on this one. We're potentially going to be having a human go back soon to the moon. Can't remember what year it's going to be in, but I know the Artemis missions are trying to take people back to the moon so that then we can figure out what exactly is there. This is all to figure out, can we drill on the moon? How's it going to work with the tools that we have equipped to these lunar modules? And then really from there, it's figuring out, with the frozen ice water that's supposedly there, that people have been able to measure with different telescopes and seeing the frequencies and the types of chemicals that are in the atmosphere of the moon, which it's not really an atmosphere. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere, but
Sure.
At least the things that come off of where the South Pole is specifically, which is where this module landed, is where they're going to be mining and figuring out exactly where there's lots of harbors of water ice, and kind of exploring and using the commercial lunar payload services that NASA was able to equip to this aircraft, or I guess spacecraft. And so Intuitive Machines and NASA kind of came together for this to be able to make it happen. And there's, of course, lots of stories, and people are watching it live, and we're unsure if it'd be a safe landing. And it was a nail biter for a little bit, leading up to the final moments of it landing. But then they finally got confirmation on Friday, and it's exciting just to have something back there and to know. A lot of people are questioning, why? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Is it even relevant? It's no, this is actually huge, because we've never actually mined to try and figure out what we can get from the ice water and what we can use that water on the surface of the moon for. That's incredible to think that we could have a whole other celestial body that we could start getting resources from.
Yeah. It speaks to this weird place that we're in from a scientific standpoint, that people want to justify science through money. And it's we're not going to go explore the moon for the sake of exploring the moon because it's so expensive and somebody somewhere is footing the bill. We'll explore the moon, but you have to make it worth our while.
Yeah.
Which is it's strange, because scientists need the money to go do what they need to do. But at the same time, that's the most anti-science thing I've ever heard in my life. I'll give you the money if it's worth my while. Well, we don't know if it's worth our while, and the only way that we'll know is if we go do it. So, great job there, privatization of space. But it's a unique situation, and I'm personally glad to see that they put something back on the moon.
Right.
We've come a long way from sending the Apollo missions to today. And we have people in orbit right now on the International Space Station. We have people that are working diligently with NASA and with programs like the James Webb Space Telescope, Hubble, all of the celestial objects that we're trying to view, all of the answers that we're trying to get from the Big Bang. And it's very necessary and it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And the moon is honestly such a question mark for us. You know, like we see it every night unless there's a new moon, right? But we see it almost every night.
Mm-hmm.
It's been there forever. And it's weird to think that we've only been to it like a handful of times as a civilization, not necessarily as a country, as a civilization. Only a handful of times have people stepped on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And from this article that you sent me from space.com, written by Mike Wall, there seems to be, with the Artemis mission and the Artemis mission initiative, that they're trying to put like a station on the moon where people stay for a while, which is fascinating.
Or
because
colonizing the moon.
Well, I don't know if we're necessarily colonizing the moon. We're not sending people there to permanently live on the moon.
It's collaboration, though, of a lot of different countries and a lot of different organizations that are making it happen. And so it's not like, there's no previous civilization there. Well, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lunar outpost, and I'm that we're trying to build,
Right.
And that's
Right.
I'm sorry, that went right over the top of my head, and then it occurred to me about 4 seconds after you said it that you were insinuating that there were other entities on the moon.
Yeah.
Incredible. Did you ever watch the movie Apollo 18?
No, I haven't. I need to.
It's
Probably.
a bad movie.
Is it that bad?
It's dumb. Like it's really stupid.
Well, maybe that's why I need to watch it. Maybe I need to be informed of why.
Like the horror Apollo 18 movie.
Oh, okay. So it's a horror movie.
Yeah,
does it play into like the whole?
It's a space horror movie.
There's aliens that are gonna come in.
No, it's like aliens on the moon, and like
Oh.
moon rocks are aliens, and they like infest the astronauts. I don't know. It was not. It wasn't a great movie. There were like kind of creepy little points where
Point taken.
it's like the camera shows the dude like creepily standing over his comrade because he's being controlled by a space rock alien. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's weird. It's a strange
too
movie.
sci-fi.
I mean, it's like they tried too hard. That's
I see.
That's what it was. It was like a ripoff of like the Mars mission movie that was kind of a horror movie, and then A Space Odyssey 2001, and that's kind of like what it felt like to me, to be honest. But aliens on the moon? ?
Aliens on the moon. I guess we'll find out.
That's
we're
that's
about
why
to-
we need to send people to the moon.
That's why we're sending people to the moon. I mean, obviously, yeah. There's probably not any aliens on the moon, but there is now Odysseus on the moon, otherwise known as Odie. Or Odie, I don't know how they pronounce it, but that's the nickname for this lunar module,
Really?
this lunar lander that was, as I said earlier, designed by Intuitive Machines, and the program that NASA paid Intuitive Machines to help them. They paid $118 million. It's known as the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, and this really was a proof of concept mission to be able to prove, okay, can we send something up to the moon and then have it deliver a small payload to the surface of the moon that then is able to mine and be able to test for certain things that we want to be able to test for. And then I don't know if it comes back or not. I doubt it. I doubt it does, because usually those are manned missions that do come back and land. But the model of the lunar lander is called Nova C, and it's reportedly, at least described by Intuitive Machines, as roughly the size of a British telephone booth with legs attached. So imagine
Nice.
one of those red British telephone booths with some legs on it. And according to NASA, it's a hexagonal cylinder with dimensions of 4 meters by 1.57 meters wide. Of course, this is from Al Jazeera that I'm reading this information, so it's in meters and not feet.
It's
Whatever.
fine. It's fine.
We roll with it. And the lander is equipped with 5 NASA payloads and 1 commercial one, a total of 100 kilograms. So really the NASA payloads will be focusing on demonstrating communication, navigation, and precision landing technologies, and gathering scientific data about rocket plume and lunar surface interactions. And then as well as space weather, kind of what I was talking about earlier, the atmosphere of the moon. The space weather and lunar surface interactions affect radio astronomy, and so being able to understand that with an actual lunar module on the surface, a lunar lander that's able to send back signals and wavelengths and frequencies of what it's detecting, as well as what we're detecting from Earth, is going to give us so much data and so much information about what's there that it's exciting. It's really exciting. The next few years, we're going to find out a lot about the moon that we didn't know.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens in our lifetime with things that are put on the moon. Are we going to put telescopes on the moon? Are we going to put radio telescopes on the moon? Are we going to put stuff on the dark side of the moon and point it into deep space and not have to worry about an atmosphere, not have to worry about the interference that you get from Earth, and you just have this like dead spot where you can observe to your heart's content?
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Well, and it also really goes to show that this is in tandem a group effort between NASA, Intuitive Machines, and then the following contractors that NASA is going to use. All the private companies that they have. We have Blue Origin, we have SpaceX, we have Virgin Galactic, or whatever his name is. I can't remember the name of that one. Something Galactic.
Jeff Bezos?
No, Jeff Bezos is Blue Origin. Elon Musk is SpaceX, obviously, and then he flew himself up in his own thing. Virgin Galactic.
I'm Googling it right now.
Yeah, Virgin Galactic CEO, if you want to look that up.
Richard
People
Branson.
probably are thinking, Richard Branson. Yeah. He gets some flack, but, they're trying to progress further into space to try and figure out what's there, how do we study it, and by providing cheaper spacecraft that are able to take off and then land and be reused for cargo missions, the space exploration that we're going to be able to do is going to skyrocket. Literally. Which is
wow. Nice.
So I just am so geeked out by this because we're about to see so many different private companies help in taking NASA payloads and things that they want to be able to investigate and learn about, and that will then benefit as a community here on Earth to like learn more about what's within our solar system and outside of our solar system potentially in the future on any asteroids, comets. I think that it's a really inspiring endeavor, and the fact that it's funded by billionaires is just the first step to get it past it being just a billionaire space race, which is what it's perceived as right now.
Sure.
Because that's what it is. That's the only way that things can become cheaper as of right now.
I'm interested throughout this entire conversation in the privatization of space with scientists. So it's like scientists doing science. Then there's also this like corporate side that is being introduced to space, which is kind of weird to me in some ways. And I offer this as an anecdote. So throughout the February 15th to February 21st and the whole event of Odysseus going to the lunar surface, it says that this article from space.com, Odysseus arrived in lunar orbit yesterday, so that was February 21st, as planned. In the home stretch of its touchdown try today, so that would have been 2 days ago, or yesterday, 2 days ago was when this article came out. The lander's handlers discovered that Odysseus's laser laser range finders, which allow it to determine its altitude and horizontal velocity, weren't working properly.
Oh.
So the team pressed NASA's experimental NDL payload into service for this vital function, pushing the landing try back by 2 hours to put the new plan into action. The last-minute workaround, which required the team to design a software patch on the ground and beam it to Odysseus, did the trick at 6:11 p.m. EST or 23:11 GMT today. So yesterday, Odysseus fired up its main engine for the crucial 11-minute burn that slowed the craft's descent to the lunar surface. Then at 6:23 p.m., Odysseus touched down softly near the rim of the crater Malapert A, about 190 miles from the lunar South Pole. And it's interesting because you have the privatization of the folks that are working together with Intuitive Machines and NASA. And Intuitive Machines, as I read this, their technology failed. So they had to go to NASA. They had to go to the scientists and say, okay, our thing didn't work, so now we need to use yours.
That was on board.
That was on board.
Of this as a payload.
Yeah. And so NASA had to bail these guys out. which I think is fascinating because that speaks to me about.
Well, NASA was relying on them too to get
It's a
it
symbiotic
there.
relationship.
So NASA kind of had a stake in it, where they're like, "Well, we kind of have to use our stuff now because how else yours failed, so now we have to rely on ours." It is a symbiosis relationship where it's working together.
Intuitive, Falcon. It was a Falcon rocket. So
Right, Falcon 9.
Falcon
and it launched
9
from a
rocket.
SpaceX, I think it was Florida. Yeah, Florida
Cape
Kennedy
Canaveral,
Space Center in
wasn't it?
Florida. And so that's what's really interesting is you have SpaceX working together with Intuitive Machines and the government, NASA. So you have three different entities right there.
Right. And it's interesting to me that neither can work without the other.
Yeah.
Like NASA needs the Falcon rocket. Intuitive Machines needs NASA. SpaceX needs both of them to justify creating the rocket in the first place, right? So it's kind of this weird, and it's been like that. It's been like that for years because you have the privatization of who's building the rockets to go to space, who's doing all this other stuff. You have rocket scientists, actual rocket scientists building rockets. But now you get to crunch time, and who do you default to? NASA. And who do you default to? The scientists. And so that's why it circles back to what I'm trying to build my mind around is this idea of the privatization of space.
Yeah. What's crazy to me is NASA's Space Tech Mission Directorate Deputy Associate Administrator. That's a mouthful. That's the whole title. Prajun Desai said, leading up to it, with the failure of the laser navigation system from Intuitive Machines, the navigation Doppler LiDAR that was on as a payload was put there as a tech demo and as a test that they weren't planning to use for the actual mission. It was just there to potentially test and use when they get there.
Wow.
So they weren't even sure they were going to use it. And then they actually had to use it to rely on to be able to safely get down to the moon and be able to use. And it just blows my mind, the people that all came into that decision making as the mission was orbiting around the moon. It said that they had to do one extra lap around the moon to allow time for the last minute switch, which is this kind of nerd-like to think you have to balance how much fuel do you have left, how much time do you have until you can actually land it, and then will this thing even work that's a tech demo on our as a payload.
Crazy.
Yeah, it really goes to show how many things just have to align to make it work just right.
The thing that's also fascinating to me is that they had to create new technology. They had to write a patch that they then beam to it while in orbit to try and fix the problem. Because remember, there's nobody there. If it fails and it's a technical failure, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You can't send somebody to go and fix it. It's just there. It just becomes space junk that orbits the moon if it fails.
Yeah.
Or it blows up on the surface of the moon, which is even worse.
Well, and that's what some people were fearing because apparently following the successful landing, there was no signal from the moon lander for a couple of minutes, like a few minutes passed. And so then there was initial concern about the lander status, but eventually a communications links between the lander and the control team on Earth was established. And then within a couple hours, Intuitive Machines reported that it was upright and starting to send data, and they were able to show images. And that's when we first saw the things that we saw on X, which is where a lot of this was taking place. You saw it live posts all the way through, and it said when I saw package delivered, and I saw that at the top of my feed because I follow all this space stuff. So it was the first thing I pulled up. I was just so thrilled, and I was like, wow. Like I didn't even take any part in the mission, but I get to like learn about it and try to understand it, and it just like gets me excited for all the things that are possible to come.
Yeah. It says that it took 15 tense minutes for the IM-1 team to latch onto Odysseus's signal.
Wait, 15 tense minutes?
Yep.
Or
Like
tense.
tense. It was a tense moment.
Tense. Okay.
Yeah, you're like, what's a tense
15.
minute?
A tense minute? Yeah. What kind of space technology?
We've got minutes, and we're tightening it with a wrench. They're tense minutes.
Oh, that's funny.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nothing? All right.
It's sorry. Yeah. It's
No.
tense.
That's why I
It
need
was
Jimmy
there.
here, man. Jimmy
Yeah,
laughs
right?
at everything that I say.
Hey, last episode with Jimmy was great, by the way. Just to shout out Jimmy right there. I mean, went off the rails a little bit in some areas, but that's also what is so fun about Jimmy is like it's fun to go off the rails with him.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
We'll have him back on the show. But
Well, and I also find it interesting. You guys touch on like exoplanets and like being able to study where exoplanets are, and this whole idea of sending a crewed mission or things to other celestial bodies in the solar system kind of relates to exoplanets and maybe the possibility of one day of having some sort of propulsion or some sort of lunar module that we're able to then propel through space, whether it be solar what do they call solar flare? Not solar
sails.
Solar sails.
Yeah.
That then would, propel at such a high speed to get us somewhere, or some other form of propulsion that we haven't discovered yet, and then would help us study and figure out what's on exoplanets, just like how we're doing with the moon right now. So I think it's it seems like a stepping stone, right? Like for the moon landing right now, first in over 50 years by the U.S., allows us to then study, figure out what's exactly on there, prepare the South Pole for NASA's next crewed mission in September of 2026 with Artemis 3, and then from there, making the jump 2029, 2020, or 2030 to the Mars. And that's where things get really crazy, because so many people have mixed feelings about how Elon Musk says we will send humans to Mars by 2030.
Sure. Well, and this gets us into some of the Artemis stuff, because you have the lunar missions that are happening right now. You have Odysseus that's on the moon currently. As we record, Odysseus is on the moon doing its scientific stuff. And let's talk for a second about the Lunar Gateway. So the Artemis program includes the development of a lunar orbiting outpost known as a Lunar Gateway. The gateway will serve as a staging point for a crewed mission to the moon and then beyond. It is designed to be a collaborative project involving international partners. And again, I'm kind of stuck on this idea about the privatization of space. And what does that do? There's a bunch of implications. There's space tourism. Are we going to start sending people to space because it's fun? And if that's the if that's the case, are we going to re-experience a bunch of Ocean Gate stuff because we have people trying to rush into space and then blow themselves up? It seems likely.
It's going to happen.
It'll happen. It has to happen.
The more we send people to space, it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, and then that's going to damage
the reputation
of how we send
of
people to
space
space.
travel.
Which space tourism seems like, and I would be the first person to be like, send me. It seems like a scam. Not gonna lie to me. It personally, until we have advanced enough technology to be able to routinely send people to space.
Yeah.
And I get it. It's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You have to be able to establish that you can do it to then proof of concept that you can continue to do it. But at the same time, if you continue to do it, the chances that you mess it up grow exponentially. So
Right.
I get it. It's a catch-22. You have to do it to prove that you will continue to do it or not to do it, but it needs to be done correctly. And so there's space tourism. There's economic implications. What is that going to do to world economies?
Cool.
Technological advancements. What kind of technology are we lacking today in the most advanced civilization in our solar system?
Yep.
The only civilization in our solar system, as far as we know. But come on, we're the only ones here. It's all good. We've been looking for hundreds of years. We'd be able to see if there was something on Neptune. There's nothing on Neptune.
I've been looking in the right areas,
except gas. So yeah, I really want there to be an interstellar wormhole out by Saturn or whatever it is, but it's not there. So I'm not thinking too hard about it. Technological advancements. What are we lacking that we need to get there? Environmental considerations, collaboration versus competition, access to space, who gets to go, who doesn't. There's so much to think about. And then we're like, all right, Lunar Gateway, Artemis program. We're going to put an orbiting outpost known as the Lunar Gateway. It'll be a staging point for crewed missions to the moon and beyond. So what do you think about this Lunar Gateway idea?
So the Lunar Gateway is really interesting to me because it embodies what we've kind of already talked about with the European Space Agency, NASA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the Canadian Space Agency, the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. I mean, that's just right there, 5 different agencies and groups that not only come from different countries that speak different languages, but are also so made up of so many different people and characters that have so many different backgrounds and yet can have one mission all together to come to try and put something up into the orbit around the moon to allow us to communicate and have a science laboratory and a habitat module for astronauts that then will eventually allow us to use that. It sounds like as a docking bay almost for sort of spacecraft when we send it up, and then be able to go down to the moon.
Just crazy.
And come. It sounds like Star Wars.
Sounds like Star Trek. That's what
Yeah,
it sounds like.
Star Trek,
Yeah.
like the Lunar Gateway. It's just like so cool to think that we are living in the most exciting time for sure. Like we get to see some of the most interesting like evolutions of what technology that probably was in the works, over 100 years ago in like the beginning of figuring out the computation and the ways that we could send up something with a human, through the Apollo missions. And then eventually it succeeded and that worked. And was there trials and tribulations along the way? Yeah. But did we stop it? No, we were destined. And I think that's what's interesting fact about this is that right now, the space race back then was more so about like we have to beat the Soviet Union,
right?
Or like we got to get up before them, we got to land on the moon before them. Now it's more so let's get all these private companies to make it cheaper so we can send more people up. Let's go explore and let's try out these different names. So like the of different things. I saw the Lunar Gateway was previously named for it, Deep Space Gateway. And then it was renamed the Lunar Orbital Platform Gateway. And then eventually they renamed it to the Lunar Gateway, which I'm glad they stuck with that name.
Lunar Gateway sounds fire.
It does. Like that's the
It's punchy. It's good. Like it's short.
The Deep Space Gateway, which
The DSG.
The DSG. Yeah, I just like
it. Sounds like an illicit drug.
It does, right? Did you ride the DSG to the moon, man? Yeah, I rode the DSG to the moon. No, I rode the LG.
Yo,
the
give me some of
Lunar
that
Gateway.
DSG, bro.
Oh man, it's just so fun to like see all the namings of these things. Like we talked about on a previous episode, like Space Force and like how Space Force is a real thing that's actually observing how we can make sure to securely, send things up and make the low Earth orbit and orbit around the Earth not polluted with all this space junk that could potentially take over when as we send more and more things up. And I think that's what's going to be interesting is as we do send things up more, such as Odysseus, Lunar Gateway, and all these different spacecraft, there's going to be at the same time a private company, which I think there already are, and I know SpaceX has come up with ideas of turning Starship into almost like a garbage truck, and it goes through and it's able to open up and has a magnet that is able to suck in some of the space materials and then put it in its front cone and then take it back down and have it recycled and then reused. And like that sounds space sci-fi just all the way right there.
It's very like intergalactic Wall-E.
Yeah, it is Wall-E. It's Wall-E. Eve. Eve. Oh gosh.
You sound like E.T. Stop it.
E.T. go home. Dude, E.T. Do you know E.T.? I was like looking it up yesterday because I was like, what does E.T. even stand for? And then I was like, and I looked it up, I was like, oh, wow. Extraterrestrial. Are you kidding me? How did I not know this?
Bruh.
And I was like, I thought ET stood for something specific because I was like, yeah, ET is a special name. And I was like, well, they just named it extraterrestrial? Really?
E-E-T-E-E.
E.T. E.T. go home.
It's extraterrestrial, dude.
Extraterrestrial. Yeah, but we name things as extraterrestrial, but the more that we become extraterrestrial, are we going to have to change the definition of extraterrestrial?
Ooh, I like it. That's a good question. Are we going to have to rename ourselves as we become less terrestrial based?
Yeah, like if someone goes to Mars, lives there, and comes back, they're extraterrestrial as of right now for our definition. Or let's say someone has a kid on Mars.
There you go. The first Martian.
Yeah, whole other species. A Martian, an actual Martian. Yeah, if you come back, as of right now, our definition, and you were born on Mars, you would be an extraterrestrial. So
my wife and I are
out.
going to Mars specifically to have a child because I want that child to be the first Martian. I'd like that to be in the Van Camp lineage. Thank you very much.
Could you imagine having like the family tree and like all goes back to this one like The Martian, the original ET that changed the definition of what ET is.
Well, think about it.
don't know.
Humans have been doing that for hundreds of years. The first people that landed in Virginia, they named the first child that was born there Virginia Dare, I think it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's.
Well,
I'm,
and like
I'm
the-
pulling way back to like 6th grade there, so I hope that that's accurate. But
It is interesting though as we move forward into more space and more on the moon, celestial objects on Mars, and more people and our human centric ideas get spread there. Are we going to do the same things that we did when we created towns and civilizations here on planet Earth? Are we going to use the same naming conventions? Like we have streets in Manhattan that are named after, older white men who were prominently in power at the time that were able to create good policy and laws and help, build up the society and the civilization. And is that going to be the same thing that we do on Mars when we create roads and ways of travel? And are we going to have the Van Camp Speedway on Mars at some point?
heck yeah, we will. Are you
If
kidding
you have
me?
the first Martian,
There we go.
like just Van Camp Highway, Van Camp Speedway. I just really want like an observatory on Mars. That'd be the
That's what I want.
Wagner Observatory or Wagner Observatory. And-
They'll study Plutonian dynamics there.
yes, exactly. Call back to one of our first second, third episode.
It was
geez.
more than that, but it was. And
It's
I was.
crazy
Can I
to
can I
think.
just say I was correct? My 6th grade knowledge was correct. Virginia Dare, born August 18th of 1587, was the first English child born in the New World English colony, and in the Virginia colony, and she was actually part of the lost colony of Roanoke. So.
Wow.
Whoops. We don't know when she died because nobody knows where they went. But that's I was correct on that. So
See,
big brained.
Yeah. And that just okay, so the naming conventions and the things that we name people after or we name our streets after, a lot of it comes from the historical figures that we do study about. And so the people that go to Mars, those will inevitably become the first historical figures almost that will help write the Constitution of Mars. Or will it be a constitution? I don't know.
I can see it right now. Mars Van Camp has a deal with Mars candy bars.
See, and then now you get forms of governance, and then you're you think of the form of governance that's on Mars and the technology that we'll have. I think it's going to be a different form of governance. I don't think well, okay, never mind. I can't make that hypothesis because I have no clue.
Wait,
if capitalism
say
is
it.
going to... I just don't think capitalism is going to be sustainable in an environment where you literally have to rely on others to live when you're the first 5 to 10 people that get to Mars and you're like, okay, we got to conserve our resources because the next thing that's going to come from Earth is in 5 months. And then or 6 months or whatever, however long. I forget
That's
how
not an
long it is.
inaccurate hypothesis because we were doing that for hundreds of years.
Right.
When we sent people to make colonies and new lands. That's
And it was closer to a hunter-gatherer society at that time, though.
Yeah.
And so with the evolution of our species and technology and more things that we can rely on, I think that, there's going to be some sort of, robot, artificial intelligence companion that's going to allow you to compute and do the things that it will help get food and resources and gather together, on the space or the... What am I trying to say here? The entire area on Mars, or at least as we know of, anywhere on Mars that you go, we're not going to be able to breathe. So we need to figure out some sort of solution to that on the surface. That's what I was trying to look for. The surface of Mars is obviously really hostile to humans. So if we're actually going to send people to Mars and the moon, we're going to have some sort of companion. So I think we're going to have some sort of robot, whether that be from, the... what's the group that's making robots right now that's it has Spot. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name now.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Something robotics. And then you have...
Is it it's like Massachusetts robotics or something like that.
Right. Who created Spot, the robot, is Boston Dynamics.
I was close.
Massachusetts.
I had the state right.
Yeah, it's close enough. Boston Dynamics, though. Boston Dynamics has created some incredible videos showcasing robots that could eventually help us in being able to gather and go back to kind of the hunter-gatherer societies that we once were, but in a more advanced way. And to think that we're going to have to rely on that to be able to navigate these like horrible atmospheres and treacherous surfaces that, on the moon, there's less gravity. I mean, there's a reason why we're sending lunar modules there and ways of being able to explore and build up our civilization or at least our colony. I don't like colony because I feel like colony and colonization is like
it has
to
like a bad
connotation
Yeah.
attached to it at this point. I mean, that is kind of what we're doing,
Sending
but there's no
explorers.
people there that we're like colonizing. So we're creating our own new civilization in a desolate, environment that we're going to have to really figure out and navigate. And Odysseus is the first step in that direction, and creating the spacecraft that we have, and relying on the robots like Spot or I can't remember the name of the robot that Boston Dynamics created that can do like the backflip. I don't know if you saw the
I've seen
backflip that of it.
I've watched
and
videos.
and then you have like Optimus, the Tesla's bot that they're creating. Have you seen Optimus?
I saw a quick clip of it the other day.
Like picking up things and having fingers like it's like an egg, and it can set it back down.
I really wanted it to squish the egg. I wanted it to
right?
like crunch. And like, well, back to the drawing board.
So bad. Like I love those videos of like the first robots that are like pogo sticking and like jump up and down, and then the pogo gets off and then and it just like he falls over. And
Have you had too much caffeine today?
today's been crazy, honestly, for
Yeah.
me. There's been a lot of caffeine ingested in a wild week for Wildcat 91.9.
That's
so,
true. That's true.
That's just beside the fact, though. I'm just hyped up on all this space stuff because honestly, when we get talking about where we could go as a species and like what is possible within the next 10 to 15 years, legitimately, it's awe-striking or awestruck, whatever the word might be.
Awestruck is like you are awestruck.
Yeah, it's
So, like,
awe-striking in
like that.
the act of being
There you
struck
go.
by awe.
In the present.
Yeah, so like I was in the act of being struck by awe, reading all about how Intuitive Machines was able to collaborate and really bring back kind of the flame, you could say, to the wonder about what we're gonna actually do this. Like they successfully landed this lunar module here, and now it's exploring and figuring out what types of the payloads can study that are on the ship. And there's like 5 other payloads that I still need to like look into and figure out about. Maybe that's something I'll just look up right now. But
Well, while you look that up, we're in desperate need of stepping aside. So coming up next, more here on The Space Between about a sustainable lunar presence, international collaboration, and looking to the stars.
In a world drowned in artificial light, the stars above are disappearing, but there's hope. Dark Sky International is on a crucial mission to restore the nighttime environment and protect communities from the harmful effects of light pollution through outreach, advocacy, and conservation.
Light pollution disrupts wildlife, impacts human health, wastes money and energy, contributes to climate change, and blocks our view of the universe.
Dark Sky International fights against this silent intruder, working to reclaim the beauty of our natural night landscapes.
Communities, parks, and regions can earn the coveted Dark Sky Place designation, a symbol of their commitment to preserving our shared night sky.
Your choice of outdoor lighting matters. Be a part of the solution, not the problem.
Following responsible lighting practices, passing dark sky-friendly legislation, and advancing scientific research in this field are just some of the ways light pollution can be solved.
Visit darksky.org to get involved and stand with Dark Sky International in the battle against light pollution. The stars are counting on us.
Well, so too much caffeine, a little bit of ADHD, and the thought of exploring not only our own planet, but going to Mars is pretty exciting. But let's reel it back to this lunar idea, because we had started out with Odysseus, and I want to finish up with moon-related stuff. But it also does kind of breach into the intergalactic, I guess you could say, because first of all, the final goal of the Artemis missions is to create a sustainable lunar presence. So in addition to crewed missions, Artemis aims to establish a sustainable human presence on the moon, enabling scientific research and the development of technologies for future deep space exploration. And that's personally very interesting. And what it's going to take is international collaboration. It's not going to be just America that's funding it. It's not going to be just China. It's not going to be just Russia. It's not going to be just NASA or the European Space Agency. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to take everybody to be able to get that far and to sustainably stay that far away while we continue to look towards the stars. And I'm reminded of a video that I was watching the other day where it was talking about, type 1 civilizations, type 2 civilizations, the ability to do all of that. And it's interesting. And I people are going to be like, well, what on earth is wrong with this guy and his fetish for the movie Contact? I really don't. I don't like, it's such a great movie. And there's so many like fascinating quotes. There's so many fascinating quotes throughout this movie. And when Dr. Arroway is trying to figure out if she's going to be the person to go in the thing, there's I don't want to spoil it for you. I'm trying to like censor this. There's a question that she's asked about if you could meet another alien civilization, what would you say? What's the if you could ask them one question, what would that question be? And she said, how did you escape your technological adolescence without destroying yourself? Ooh. And I'm like, whoa, okay, heavy, because we're in the technological adolescence where we either destroy ourselves or we don't. And I personally feel the weight of that these days as like an individual, where I look around, I look at what's happening geopolitically, and I say, we're technologically advanced to just full stop destroy everybody. Are we going to do that? Do I trust the people in charge with all of the big red buttons to not press them in the next coming decades? Call me a pessimist? I can't say that I do. Straight up. And it's going to take firm international collaboration. It's a worldwide effort to be able to go beyond Earth and go to the stars. And so that's where I pose the question to you. How do you think we're going to go beyond the technological adolescence without destroying ourselves and look towards the heavens and be able to explore that in a meaningful way, develop the technology required to get out there and potentially even make first contact with civilizations that are light years and hundreds and thousands and millions of light years away from us?
The difficult part about all this is that there are so many people that have trouble understanding technology and the advancement of it already and how fast it's developing, that there's going to be so many people who kind of get left behind because they can't adapt to that. Because the underlying issue with all this is that this is predicated on the advancement of technology. The only way we get off planet Earth and we are able to explore other planets and be able to work together and make more things is because of technology. Or at least our understanding of technology as it is right now. Maybe there's something that we discover down the line that's an element that maybe we classify as technology, but it isn't, and it's something to do with physics. Or, there's so many different variables that have to come into play in this question that when I do really just try to boil it down, it comes back to the acceptance of technology and new types of applications that can be used with whatever the technology is in tandem with other countries and so many people that have been separated for hundreds and hundreds of years by borders and languages that will all eventually somehow come together. And that's where the pessimism is almost easier because you're like...
It feels dystopian. Like it feels fake.
Yeah. It feels like there's so many variables that have to go right that the easier question is just, the easier answer is just say it's all going to go wrong. And that's the pessimistic way out. And I'm a horrible optimist, so I've always been in search of what the answer might be. I feel like I've been searching ever since I took my astronomy class here at K-State. Shout out Chris Sorensen, my professor. He really opened my eyes to a lot and figuring out, okay, let's have a moon log and let's log every single night on where the moon is, even if you can't see it. I was like, what do you mean? You're supposed to log the moon even if you can't see it? And it's like, no, you know where it is because you've been logging it every night. so you know what to expect, where it might be. And that's the same thing with everything around us. The more that you look at something and the more that you study it over and over and over, the better understanding you're going to have. And I feel like that's what it's going to take, is the development of technology and the advancement of not only our data collection, but using the algorithms that help us understand this data in a way to help benefit the progress and the evolution of society, and not detract from it. And that's kind of where we're at this tipping point, especially with like information and how the algorithms right now for social media are used to almost cause harm, where they're taking our information and they're advertising to us. And so using those same types of algorithms and ways of being able to, break down information and then be able to simplify it or make sense of it is what we're kind of going through right now with AI and artificial intelligence, that I feel like is a stepping stone towards being able to then use that on a larger scale to then get data from different parts of, the universe and from space and from the moon and from Mars, that then we're going to be able to break down all these data sets really, really quickly with artificial intelligence and the algorithms and large language models that we build, that then will help us be able to use the equipment and hopefully further our advancement through all the different, things that are on Odysseus. That's really what it comes back to for me, is trying to wrap it all back in. That I know I spewed out a lot of different things right there, but it's a complicated answer that doesn't have just one specific, this is it. But if I did have to boil it down to, the one thing that helps save humanity and move us forward is technology and the ability for it to bridge the gaps that currently we have between the societies here on Earth.
Yeah.
That's my optimistic view. And maybe that's me being a technologist. I don't know if you've looked up that definition, what a technologist is.
No, I haven't. But as you said, and I think that this is the part where I get stuck, and it's because you are an optimist and I said pessimist, and people say I'm a realist, and it's like, okay, all right, relax there, buddy. But I do in a lot of ways consider myself a realist, and that I'm personally willing to entertain the options that people aren't willing to entertain because that frightens them. I'm not even remotely trying to make this about politics, but like when somebody, I know people who are preppers. And part of me is like, well, I kind of see the logic behind why you're doing this.
It's a balance.
Can you take it way too far? Totally.
100%.
Do you need
People already have.
Do you need the missile silo bunker under your house? No. But is there wisdom in being prepared?
Well, some people don't prepare at all because they don't want to have to live through that's going to be.
Exactly. And or they can't entertain that option. Like that kind of failure on the human level is just, they can't entertain it. And I get that. That's totally fine. If you're that person, I'm not trying to dunk on you. What I am trying to say, though, is that all of the options of failure and success need to be looked at evenly. And that's where I think we're going to make strides internationally in communications and in international cooperation, with the goal of moving beyond the Earth, because that seems like the natural progression to me. The natural progression. We're looking at how can we get to the moon. This is the first time ever that we've sat down as a civilization, which is such a fascinating thing to consider. It's the first time that we've sat down collectively as a civilization and said, we are going to try to put people in a sustainable experience on the moon. We're going to put a sustainable lunar presence together, and we're going to keep humans on the moon. Crazy. That sounds like something out of science fiction. It's being truly entertained today. That's one of the goals. That's like the end goal of the Artemis missions, is to create a sustainable lunar presence.
Right.
So humans are currently looking upward to the sky and saying, can we get there? Yes, I think so, with time and in technology. And then you say, well, can we go to Mars? Yes, probably in the future, with time and technology. Can we get to Jupiter? there's probably you can't go to the surface of Jupiter because it's gas, but there you could
We
try.
fly by it?
Yeah, and could you be in orbit around Jupiter? Well, maybe. Well, that'd be kind of crazy. So there's things that you can look forward to, and that to me, the hope of what could be, can be the catalyst for why we are able to move beyond our technological adolescence and not destroy ourselves. And that's maybe naive because it all relies on hope.
Right.
But it relies on the collective belief of something bigger than yourself for civilization. And I think that that's something that's really positive that's coming out of the Artemis missions because it has to start somewhere. And if it starts with the moon that we see every night, and suddenly there's people on the moon and they're staying on the moon and we have a sustainable presence on the moon, then the sky's the limit. You can continue to push that boundary. And that's what I think is exciting about all of this. And that we'll probably have a sustainable lunar presence if we don't blow ourselves up in my lifetime, which is cool. Will I live to see a sustainable Martian presence? I don't know. That seems like technology that's within our grasp, but also really far away. Will I see people traveling the cosmos in my life? No. And I'm okay with that. But if I got to be a part of the generation, and I'm not even a scientist, I'm just here talking on my podcast. But if I got to be a part of the generation that was the group that said we started it all by getting people on the moon and staying on the moon, that's cool. That's really cool to me. And that gives me personal hope for the future. I don't know how that makes you feel.
No.
Leave it in our poll at the end.
Yeah.
I'll put it down in the Spotify poll. If you use Spotify, vote. Does that make you feel good? Does that make you feel bad? The hope of a sustainable lunar presence. How does that make you feel about our future? I really want to know. But it makes me feel good. There's a hope in that. And then also the survival of our civilization. If we're able to put people on the moon and we blow ourselves up on Earth, people on the moon have a better shot at being okay. You know what I'm saying? So there's
And
there's
on Mars, if we have people on Mars, you know.
There's
more
other people
in other places.
Yeah, there's more people in other places so that if something cataclysmic happens on home base, then at least you have other outposts where people are still there, and it's just not like humans are eradicated altogether. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and they can keep spread. I think that's really what like people fear is like. It's almost like an ego death in a way. If you blow yourself up on Earth, everything's gone, and the ego's gone, and everything's obliterated because you can't recover it. But if you have somehow in the cloud servers, information to be stored in other places that we can put it, so then future civilizations can find it and know what we were, what we are, like you continue and are able to allow the human experiment that we are to keep thriving in the consciousness of future beings.
Yeah.
And to me, that is comforting for some reason. To know that we won't, that somehow my voice on these airwaves will continue permeating throughout all of the cosmos forever. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's real. That's something my ancestors can't even wrap their mind. Can't even begin to process. But the fact that we can, because of education and because of knowledge and the willingness to just have an open mind to learning about, the things that are kind of complicated, which is what technology is. Technology is complicated.
Yeah.
And the more that we can educate ourselves on the type of technology and be able to use our knowledge and technical expertise in different areas, maybe we'll create what the word I was trying to find earlier, not a technologist, a technocracy, which almost sounds like, authoritarian in some ways because, you just have some technocratic person that says one thing. It's like, no, actually technocracy is a form of government in which the decision makers are selected based on their expertise in a given area of responsibility, particularly relating to what type of scientific or technical knowledge they have. So I like to hypothesize and throw out there that the form of governments on Mars might one day be a technocracy. And we're able to implement, the things that that people are really good at. You have a few select people that are really good at some things, and we send the best there to be able to do those things. Because you're not going to send your worst to Mars at first, unless you want them to just
Die.
Yeah, die, roll over and die.
I mean,
you kind of have to sacrifice the best, but that's to be able to create a thriving society eventually one day. And that's why they get the names of the streets.
wow.
There we go.
In the words of Jimmy, what a pull.
What a pull. What a pull.
Well, to me, it all starts with the moon. And I think that if we go in the route that we've hypothesized is possible on this podcast, that philosophers, scientists, thinkers from around the world for hundreds of years have been wondering and trying to solve the answer to it. Will we continue on? Will we survive? We're in a pivotal moment of history. I don't think anybody can deny that we are in some ways looking down the barrel of our own destruction. That's crazy. That's like disturbing to think. But on the flip side of that coin, we're also looking up to the heavens towards our own salvation, I think, in some way. And that's really what it comes down to for me. And I think that we're going to be a part of a generation that, if it goes correctly, hundreds and hundreds of years from now, people will look back on the Odysseus mission and they'll say, that's cool. And that's what got all of it kickstarted to get us out to where we are today. And I didn't even watch the stupid thing because I'm a moron. I'm stupid myself. I was out having margaritas, and I completely forgot that they were landing something on the moon. I should have canceled everything and watched this pivotal moment in human history. But instead, I was out. I was out celebrating National Margarita Day and 50% margs in downtown Manhattan. So you can see where my priorities ultimately lie.
hey, but you're talking about it now. You're learning about it just like everybody else. And what we're doing is what we're trying to do as a human species right now. Between Earth to Mars to the moon, we're bridging the space between.
Oh, man. Very nice. Wow.
I had to get my own in there.
There you go. I almost you like led me into the perfect space between moment when you were talking about the bridge. I was gonna be like, bridging the space between, but I didn't say it. I wanted to see what happened.
I set up my own and I knocked.
You knocked that basketball off the side.
Sorry, it was
and
a pole.
You dunked your own. You dunked your own rebound. That was nice. Anyway,
it's fun.
Yeah, it's good. Well, as we wrap things up, I'm really fascinated by the possibility of people going back to the moon, because I think it'll happen unless something cataclysmic happens, or for whatever reason scientists say no, we shouldn't do that, and I don't think there's anybody saying that right now. And cooperation continues between intergovernmental bodies, and everything stays at the status quo of where it's currently at. In the next 10 years, we'll have people back on the moon, which is really
will
cool.
we send Odysseus to the moon and will it land? Yes, actually, it happened.
There you go.
Now we get to say that.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Very cool. Well, that's going to conclude today's edition of The Space Between. If you want to check out all of the rest of our content, you can, wherever you get your podcasts from. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, iHeartRadio, we're everywhere. So appreciate you tuning in there. If you want to be a part of our discussions and our exclusive content, especially as we gear up for the Very Large Array here in just a couple of weeks, then go check us out on Patreon, www.spacebetweenpodcast.com/Patreon. $2 a month gets you into our exclusive Discord server, the Quantum Computer. And then $5 a month gets you over into our exclusive content that will be shared on our Patreon page only for the people that are subscribed. So if you want to be a part of that, you are more than welcome to join that particular party, because we'd love to see you there. We appreciate everybody tuning in today. Coming up next, nothing more but The Space Between.